So it's awesome that you're here on one of our beautiful, beautiful Michigan days. So when Liz asked me to be part of this exhibit, I was super excited because it speaks to the core of who I am and what I am, you know, celebrating. I love Michigan. I call it my sacred home. So I give voice to that in my artwork. I give voice to the sacred quality of nature, our relationship with nature. And so I thought I was going to be talking about the work itself. And I'm happy to do that. And anybody who has a question at any time, stop me and ask me a question. And I guess there are those of you online do that too. But today's Thursday. I don't know if it was maybe Monday of this week that I went online to the Crooked Tree site and saw that my talk was labeled Creativity as Meditation. I didn't know that was going to be my talk today. So I thought, okay, I'll do that. Of my own creative process. There's, you know, when Johnny and I talk about everything all the time, Johnny, my husband, and, you know, there's really no separation of who I am between the artist who I am, which I've been my whole life, the druid that I am, the pickleball player that I am. So I'm always looking, I'm always curious. I move into altered states quite easily. And what I wanted to do today, which way does this go? Does it go this way? Okay, there are a lot of words. You can read that if you want to, but if you don't, I'm going to be talking also. I love words and image. I love to combine, you know, and this is the beginning of my artist statement, because this captures the essence of what happens to me, how I'm inspired, how I engage in the world. And I don't really go out on walks for meditation. Walking my labyrinth is a different story, but I'm always curious, looking, and aware of the beings that I'm surrounded by. So the trees, buildings, the rocks, the rivers. And when you open yourself up to these other realms, you start to hear their stories. And then you know, there's this kind of communication that goes on. And it arrests you. So I almost always have something with me, right? I never have sound, so I don't like ambient sound. I don't, and I would encourage everyone not. Anytime really you're outside, not to have ambient, because it's going to create a static in your brain, and you won't necessarily be able to hear the incredible breath that surrounds you, whether it's the trees or it's the chippies or the angry red squirrels. But so by having this, I'm able to, it's just images, objects, entities will just call out to me. And so I will take an image of it, and that image story then, and the story that I hear kind of percolates inside of me. And so that when I go to my studio, which I go to my studio every day, and I cross the threshold, and the threshold's really important because my creative process is really a very ritualized process. And so when you have any ritual, there's a container. So when you cross over that space, I'm instantly moving into this kind of very psychically safe space, but also a sacred space and a liminal space. And so when I designed the studio, this is my dream studio. I've had studios my whole life. I've been in warehouses for a lot of it. And back in 2014, when I knew we were selling our house and I had some jingle jangle to be able to build my studio, I knew that I wanted it to hold both not only myself, but also other people when they come into the space. And as an aside, I have this PhD, it's in mythological studies with emphasis in depth psychology, which is basically Jungian psychology. Carl Jung had the Bulletin Tower. So there's my nod to Jung, but I had to have a tower. Who doesn't want a tower? That's inside my tower. These are my memory boats. And so I love whimsy. I love the unexpected. And I love magic. And so, to be able to walk in and you look up and it's like, what? And they're floating boats. These honor the seasons. So the one on the far right is hops, just to give you an idea of what those boats look like. Those boats are 2 feet. Most of them are made out of clay and then painted in oil, and they carry the bounty of the earth, right? So just as an aside, all my work so much of my work is dealing with environmental issues, the love of nature, and really wanting all of us to, in that love, to be aware that we need to tend it, right? We don't use it, we're in consort with it, right? And so these memory boats were to celebrate, to hopefully kindle people's memories of when they're out in nature. Maybe they see Gerber daisies, or they see hydrangea or hops. So this is in my studio. And there's famous Sparky, my best dog in the known universe. So I wanted this studio to have the outside inside. So you look up, you look out, you're surrounded in every room by the natural world. I wanted the space to be a flexible space. I do consulting work. So I wanted to be able to have a place to see clients. Most of the tables are on rollers, so I can do workshops. So it's my space. It's a place where I do a lot of prayer. And I think I don't know that anyone's ever walked into this space where they don't feel just kind of calm. So I do a lot of things. And this is my encaustic room. So when I designed the space and I was involved so I knew I wanted an encaustic room. And in encaustic, you have to have horizontal venting because you work with the wax. Encaustic is beeswax and damar resin. And many of my pieces include that here. You have to have horizontal venting because if the wax gets up to it's like 220 and up, it can emit poisonous fumes. And so you really want to be venting horizontal. But the other thing to note here is that all around the studio are these open shelves. I work in a lot of different processes. And so when you're working, you don't want to be opening cabinets. You just want to be able to go right there. So I'm also a photographer, and the body of work that is here is part of my Enchanted Forest series. And those are all mixed media pieces. And they begin with a suggestion of an image with a pigment print. But the bigger, large pieces and all this other work is part of my other series, which is Awe. And I have, so before 2012, I did all my printing in the darkroom. But in 2012, I had a new body of work that came out. And Johnny, who's a master printer, my husband, prints my images now, and they're amazing. They're just amazing. So this is a piece I just finished. This is Buckeye. I'm working on a book focusing on trees and meditations. And so what's important to see here is that, see those sharp pencil points? This is all, and all these things are all, and that's part of that meditative process. So when I'm making, there's a full movement into process, a love of making, no matter which one I'm working in. But it's just this slight repetitive motion, and that repetitive motion really takes your mind just deeper and deeper, incredibly calming. And it also then allows the image to speak, to come up what it wants to be, so that I'm not dictating on the image. There's in the process, there's still that dialogue back and forth. So, I'm having an open studio day in August, and you are all most welcome to come. And be prepared, because there's a lot to see if you want to see it. It's very hard for people when they come in the studio to really see everything, because it's my life. So everywhere I go, I'm always finding things. And so this is a mixed media piece that I did around a yellow-bellied sapsucker, which prior to today, I thought was a hairy woodpecker. Looking at hairy woodpeckers this morning, like, but they don't have this and this little yellow belly. And these are just, I'm always finding feathers. So there are feathers all over my studio. And doesn't it feel like when you find a feather that is, that the bird's like leaving you a little gift? It's wanting you to see it. It's wanting you to know I'm here too. And so these were not found when I found the yellow-bellied sapsucker. These were found randomly, walking to my labyrinth, walking in the woods, being around. And they just literally will present. I'm sure they do this to you. They will do it. This will happen. If it hasn't been happening, it will happen. All you have to do is just open yourself up to receiving and abandoned nest. This is a sad story here, but it was important for me to honor it. So my very favorite bird is the hermit thrush. Those are hermit thrush eggs. So we had a hermit thrush. I was over the moon in our wildflower, one of our wildflower beds. And I was over the moon. And so, but I go to the studio every day. So there's a car coming in, car going out, car coming in, car going out. So I think eventually, I don't know what happened, but the nest was abandoned, but I had to keep those beautiful, beautiful eggs. And this is a big part of me too. If you squeeze it, it shoots a bubble out, because I love the ridiculous. I love, it's just fun to have stuff everywhere. So some feathers that recently presented. This is from a great horned owl that just presented 2 weeks ago. Was coming back from the labyrinth, just turning to walk up to the studio, and right there where we saw the great horned owl. I didn't look up. I was so enamored with, but the this little one right here is the first one that I caught. The great horned owl was at the base of the driveway, and I went and stood under it and was in awe, and they're fierce. Waiting for it to fly away, and when it flew, a little teeny feather came out, and I was able to catch it. Okay, just saying OHIO. Those Buckeyes came with me. Yeah. And we have so you saw the Buckeye piece that I did. That's from our Buckeye tree that I hope someday, very soon, will produce Buckeyes.
I've only found one.
Have you?
So I just wondered, yeah.
And they have different kind of Buckeye trees. So out in Texas, they're beautiful. They're bigger and different color, but super, super cool. And so I collect stones. I have stone circles all over, inside and out, and just fun things. Glass marble John found on the beach. My mom had that polar bear. The bear is one of my familiars. So creativity is meditation. So one of the reasons why I wanted you all to see all those images of the studio is that where, your environment that you create, that you have control over, that sets the tone for your mental health and your mental well-being. So if you surround yourself with things that inspire you, that make you laugh, that make you think, we're all incredibly creative, right? So it's just allowing that to flow through, whether you're a visual artist or a gardener. So there really is very little editing that goes on. So when I created this space, my dream studio, I also wanted to have a labyrinth, because I've been a labyrinth facilitator for 25 years. And long story short, we ended up with way too many stones. And so we now have the path to the labyrinth, the path to my sacred meditation grove. But that's a weird photograph. I shouldn't have used that. I'm sorry. That doesn't look right. It looks a little odd, doesn't it? Or is that my angle? That is a perfect circle. It doesn't look like it from this angle. So yes, I do have a true meditation practice as well. And I believe, just being of a Western mind, and loving to be physical, I love moving meditations. So whether it's in a Qigong practice or, more importantly, a labyrinth meditation, And so we can have focused meditations, right? A way to work through an idea, a way to let go of a worry, a way to, you know, seek inspiration. But having this labyrinth, even if I'm not on it every day, also impacts my psyche. And just knowing that it's there, knowing I can go there, or I get a phone call from someone, can I come walk your labyrinth? Knowing that that can also be there for other people is really calming. So this is one of our beautiful preserves that we've got up here. This is off of Church Street. So we all know this, right? We all know it's just amazing and what it does to our heart and our soul just being out in nature. And we look down, and so this is what I was talking about before when I take, have this phone. It's just, how can you not want to hold on to that, right? But then I go back to the studio, and so then I want to give voice to that. I want to give voice to, these globe thistles, they're bird poop thistles, they just came out of nowhere. And I was so excited because I love globe thistles, and the bees love them too. This is 24 by 24. So just again about process and about making as meditation. So the globes themselves, that's all color pencil and a little bit of pastel. This is all hand pastel. And those are, again, that fine little, the colored pencil work. I mean, do you know how many different kind of mushrooms are out there? It's just amazing. And it's just amazing. So here's another mushroom study that I did. Again, hand pastel, and then just that fine line to flesh out. So when we see these mushrooms, they're from another world. It's like, wow. And we know how medicinal and how much mushrooms are helping the planet. But they're beings, right? So hopefully there's a sense of entity there. Leaves. This is color pastel pencil, all of it. And milkweed. 20 by 24, again, color pencil, pan pastel, in encaustic. These bigger pieces are all in encaustic. And so, yeah, my mind's going into, I love to collect the pods when they turn dark, when they're ready to just, right? They're full of seeds. And then I go out on the hill. I love to sing. When I seed, I sing. And they're amazing. They're so beautiful. So I love Gaston Bachelard, and this is a quote that I use all the time because it really speaks to that place of mind, right? So creativity can be really energetic, right? And ideas come in spurts often. So it's not like you're calm all the time. There is dancing and wildness that goes on too, right? But the act of making is, I think, creative process. So this is the workshop I'm doing next Friday, and I'm going to be talking about the actual practice as meditation. And I've been working on mandalas for decades now, and most of my mandalas are watercolor and graphite. And there we have it. Questions? Comments? Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. Okay. So encaustic is you take beeswax and damar resin, and some people make their own. I do not. So I actually am not a person who, to date, as of yet, after all these many decades, likes to make my materials. I like to buy materials, and I like to buy the best materials I can, because I think that matters. I think when you work with a really fine pen, a really fine paintbrush, there's an honoring to your gesture and honoring to your stroke. So with encaustic, so that's the base. And so there's a slight yellow pigment to it because of the beeswax. It's hard, right? And so you have to work with it warmed. And you usually work with it around 180 to, let's go back to that studio. So you work with it warm. And so there are lots of different ways, but so this is a big vat where I keep the wax and I add to it. And that's for applying when you prep a plate. So you know how in painting you put gesso on? Well, in encaustic, you need to build up clear encaustic on your panel, which has to be a hard substrate. Because of the wax, you know what wax does when it bends, it cracks. So you're working on a hard substrate. I'm confusing you because some of these are paper that also have encaustic on them. And after each layer, so you want to put it on, and you generally put it on with you can do pours, you can do dips, you can dip things in it, and you can also paint it on. After each layer, you have to heat it. And it's, you take it up is to basically a flash point where you just see it. So you just develop an eye for it. And so you fuse the whole layer and then you apply another layer. And so one of the things that's really attractive about encaustic is that if you're not a painter, if you haven't been brought up with these technical skills, it isn't a medium that you can enter into and be really expressive and creative, because you build up all these, you can build up 40 or 50 layers. And you can also, encaustic comes in colors you can get, and in these crayon forms. There's just all types of ways, which by the aside, I am going to be teaching an encaustic workshop this fall. Here. So you just build up all these layers, and it's best if you heat the panel. So it's technical. It's demanding in that you really have to be aware when you're working with encaustic, because you can't let it get hot, or because of the temperature. So inside on all of my plates. There are multiple things that you can't see. I've got a hot plate over there. So for pouring, there's a heater under here. That's a flat plate because it works best if your panels are warm before you apply the encaustic. If you apply encaustic to a cold panel, it'll stick and if it's a warm panel, then you can brush it on. It's just fluid, just going on like that. So, so those little things matter, you know?
Layers or items between layers.
Yeah. You can, so you can do collage. A lot of people do collage with encaustic. So a number of my pieces are embedded into encaustic. Some, like there are numerous pieces here that, and I told you, you have to have a rigid, but I work encaustic on sheets, but it's a really thin layer of encaustic. And then I paint on the back of it. So I'm actually applying the pastel onto the encaustic surface. And then with pastel, what we know is smears and things like that. So all of this work is actually there's a lot of technique and technical things that you need to know about sprays and fixatives and sealing things up, and especially because everything I do, I work in layers. You know, as an oil painter, I always have worked in layers. And I love that because it builds depth. And it also, by working in layers, it allows me to have the image tell me more about what it wants to be. You know, there's something that happens rather than, oh, I'm just doing this piece and here it is and it's done. It changes, right? But encaustic's really neat, and a lot of people are into it. I've done several private workshops for people who come for like a 5-day with me, and who have left with whole bodies of work and have left being able to make perfect plates. But I really am a believer in technique. I was trained as a metalsmith, so jewelry, flatware, and hollowware. And so that training, it's kind of irritating in a way because it gives you this, you have to be perfect in metalsmithing. You know, a solder joint has to be just absolutely flush. And so that attention to detail is in everything I do. But when you learn technique, it becomes invisible. You want your technique to not read laborious and, oh, it's all about that. You want that to be invisible to the viewer. And I don't want to have to think about it. I want to be good enough to be able to teach it to anybody, and so that I don't have to think about it. I want it, that allows my creativity to just flow, right? But I love learning new techniques, so it's fun. So this work, you know, all of the pieces here are all mixed media. They're all done a little differently. And I got into this body of work. I actually got into encaustic years ago because I was a photographer and I was a painter. Painted in oil, watercolor, and I'm a photographer. And I'm always trying to find bridges, and I wanted that. I wanted to be able to do those things together. And that's how I started doing encaustic. And then this work started actually out of a workshop that I went to. It's fun. Yeah.
So I tend to take the beginning intro classes at Crooked Tree, like how to draw,
Yeah.
how to do pottery, everything.
Yeah.
Intro.
Yeah.
I'm never gonna be really good at anything, but I find that when I take those classes, experiencing that helps me to be a better art appreciator
Yes.
of what I see.
Yes.
Is this class gonna be something that would be appropriate for someone like me who just really doesn't have that artistic
You don't need to
skill?
know anything
Okay, good.
except hold a pencil.
Okay.
the whole point of the class, the workshop next week is truly just to learn how to be comfortable and how to do, I talk about those little teeny strokes.
So I'm doing the one next week, but I'm wondering the acoustic workshop in the fall, would that be appropriate?
This is all, I'm doing it for beginners.
Okay.
I mean, if you have, anyone who wants to take it that has knowledge, then I'll meet them where they are, and be able to take them to the next step. But absolutely. And so that's a 2-day workshop. And that's a really fundamentals, because guess what? You don't have to have an encaustic studio like that to be able to make encaustic. Because I was working in encaustic before I had this gorgeous studio. But what you need to do is either work in your garage with the garage door open, or you're working in a room with fans venting out. So, and you invest in a little thermometer, so you're very aware of your temperature. But anybody can do it, and who knows, that may be the thing that you get into. You don't know. You may go, okay. The reason why that may be, so many people get into encaustic, crafters, or people who don't have the experience, and because you can collage with it. And so I'm going to do basic, in the workshop, I'm going to do basic photo transfers. Can be your photo, can be another, a photo out of a magazine or something, but you're going to be able to learn how right away. And the possibilities are truly endless, and you can just continue to play with it and to experiment. And encaustic begs experimentation, right? This work, as you can see, is very studied and schooled. Encaustic is there's a lot of experimentation in it. It'll be fun.
I have some questions just about meditation. So you talked about the pumping meditation and doing your labyrinth, but what other types of meditation do you do? How often do you do it? Like what?
So I'm just going to be perfectly honest. I am in a meditative state at some point every single day. And that is not necessarily an intentional going into meditation. It's just when you do something most of your life, it's easy to go into that state. We live on Lake Michigan. That in and of itself, just being by the lake and allowing yourself to release thoughts and clearing your mind. And for me, just really allowing the breath of the world around us to become one with my breath. And, when you learned how to ride a bicycle, do you remember that? Do you remember beginning to learn how to ride a bicycle? And I do. It was kind of like you can do it, and it's kind of awkward at first. You really have to think about it. And then after you ride a bicycle, and then you never think about riding a bicycle again, you just hop on your bicycle and go. So part of it for me, and Skip and Julia will have a different probably take on that, because they practice a different type of meditation. But the part of it for me is just allowing myself to shift. I shift. It's been really irritating for my family, and especially this guy right behind you here. Growing up, because I did it as a child, my parents called it focusing, and I have done it since I was little. But I also, since I was little, best friend was nature. Super shy kid, best friends being out in nature. So So for someone who wants to find that way, how to move into that type of practice, where it just becomes a little more part of your life, I would suggest, my first suggestion would, if you can, to go for a walk. Well, one, go for a walk outside. Don't have anything on. Two, if you can, make that walk somewhere in nature. Up here, that's much easier. By the lake, we've got so many parks, so many, the Nature Conservancy is awesome. And don't have any expectations. Just, one of the things, so I've also done breath work all my life. Well, not all my life, but I've consciously done breath work since I was 18. And so I'm very mindful of my breath, and that calms me, doing belly breaths. And that also allows me to, I talk about being in consort with nature, but breathing. So as I breathe in, the world around me is breathing out, and I'm breathing that in, and then I breathe out, and that's being absorbed in everything around me. And so if you can just imagine that with your breath, and you're just holding on to that idea, first of all, you aren't going to be able to think about anything else, right? That dart. Oh, I gotta do this next year. I gotta remember, all of it, right? It's like, yeah. So you just allow that to fall away, and that breath, and your steps matter. Just really just taking those steps and aligning your breath with your step, and you're just, and maybe you have a destination and maybe you don't. But the more that you do it, I promise you, the more you do it, the quicker you will just boom, you'll just boom. My studio, cross the threshold, boom, I'm in that place. It's literally just crossing the threshold. But it takes practice, but it's an easy, fun practice, right? Maybe you can take 5 minutes. Sometimes we don't feel like we can take 5 minutes, but if you take those 5 minutes, and I'm a moving person as opposed to Julie and Skip, who are much more, and you can clearly talk to them. They're very zen. And I maybe am not. But I am, right? But if you take that time, your creativity will absolutely be boosted 100%. And your productivity will be boosted, because you're allowing yourself the luxury of being in the world. Yeah. Yep.
This may be preliminary to all this stuff we're saying, but I find when I'm taking a walk in nature, or even not, that my mind is just buzzing, but it's been buzzing, and now I can start to take a walk, and it's still buzzing.
Okay.
And I'm not paying much attention to what's going on
Yes.
in nature.
Yep.
And what I learned to do is work my way through the senses. So when I get going, I just say to myself, I'm hearing now. And then I just try to hear.
Mhm.
The hearing can be just about anything. It's like birds, your steps as they hit the pavement and so on. Then I switch to seeing, which seems to be the one that's the most, that's what we mostly do. And also there's occasionally smells.
Absolutely.
And the kinesthetic sense, the body sense. And I kind of work my way through all four of those. And then I try to see if they're going to come together, which they do eventually after that. And I still have to fend off thoughts in a way and just keep coming back to the senses. And I find that really useful.
Absolutely.
And a little bit preliminary, but we can say.
No, but absolutely. And so, that's, I agree with everything that Skip brought up. I always start with breath. That's just what I start with. And I actually, when people come to the labyrinth, I love for them, I show them my earth sky breathing routine, because I love connecting with earth energy and the sky energy, and where that axis mundi in between. Yeah, your senses absolutely ignite the world, right? I mean, yesterday in the sudden downpour of rain, and the smell, I mean, it just arrests you. So allowing yourself to be arrested, allowing yourself in those moments to pause is also part of it, I think. And the chatter, the monkey brain, the senses are a good way. I mean, if once you start doing the breath work, for me, sound is probably the next thing that I go to. It's amazing what you can hear when you open up to sound. And it's really hard. I mean, one of the things that you want to do when you hear things is you want to identify things. So what I like about breath is there's no identification, right? But sound, you're engaging your mind in, is that a robin? Is that a cardinal? Is that a chipmunk or a red squirrel? But then there's all the unknowns that you hear. And that to me also takes me there, because there's so many birds and so many, and you hear the whispering and the singing. So I call my studio Singing Tree Studio. That's because it's on 27 acres, just outside the city of Harbor. And walking the land, it's just like, okay, these trees are singing. And yeah. Sheila.
Hard to formulate this question about meditative states. Like you say meditative states singular, but it seems like in response to what you're saying about sensory information, that when you walk through the threshold into your studio, you move into a meditative state, and then your work is very processed. I mean, it's so many layers, so many different techniques. So you have photographic technique, drawing, all those different,
Yeah.
that engage different senses and different aesthetics. So like when you're doing that really fine detailed drawing, well, that's going to be different than smelling the temperature, that flame point or whatever you said. Like,
Yeah.
So I was just wondering, and I don't know if it's possible to identify, but I imagine there are many meditative states have many different qualities.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
I wonder if there was any way to put some language to that, maybe in relationship to the process of your work, how that meditative state involves.
Yes.
Stages.
Yes. Yeah, that's good. That's really good. So the way that I understand your question and the way that I'm going to answer it, which may not be the answer to the question. So this way of being in the world is in this meditative state that I'm out and about, just out and about every day, out and about. That's the calming part. And that's in a lot of ways, my inspiration is seeing things. And so seeing things, there's this buzz right? But being out there is the calm. The creative process part. So I am, I am a heady person. I love learning like a geek. And so a big part of my life is just absorbing information, right? And so learning all those processes is actually, it's like learning your world, right? But so having them, and here they are in my tool belt, I'm calm, but it's an alertness when I'm making. I have to be 100% alert and aware when I'm making. When I'm out, I'm not. I'm like in a I'm alert and I'm not alert. I mean, John will attest to this. He watches over me because I will like slip out of this place and slip into this liminal realm, and I will be unaware of the world around me, except this being obsessed with whatever I'm being obsessed with. And but when I'm making, I am 100% there. My mind is so I know when I need to stop working because my body and my mind can't work at that 100%. So people who say they paint, let's drink wine and paint is like the antithesis of the way I approach my work. It's like I need to, because I want to be transparent. I want to be able to have the clarity of mind to be able to move into that realm and to just be present. I want to be present with what I'm doing, with the work, with the materials. So it's meditative, but it's like an active meditation, right? Does that make sense? And so let's think about this. So we've talked about regular meditation, but so I think this can happen in anything that you do, right? So in other fields, in other things that you love. So yeah, flow, getting in the flow. So what happens with flow is that you're an open channel. And so for me, it's I say images just flow into me, or I often will be slammed with images. I mean, it'll come and I've got images, you may not be able to see them, but I've got things that have been on my shoulder wanting to be made for a very long time. It's like, oh, now you gotta wait. But again, to get into flow is practice. So if you do a meditation practice, you do Tai Chi, it's a practice. I do Qigong, it's a practice. There is, with the practice, there's not really an end point, right? It's a practice. So in my work, it's also a practice. Yes, pieces get finished, but the process is vital. It is, because there's joy and love. I mean, it's just like, and I fall in love with the color pencils. It's like whatever I'm working with is just, oh, yeah, it's unbelievable. The encaustic, the color encaustic. Oh, when I oil paint, that's when I go crazy, because the flow of the paint, the color, the blending, so juicy. Yeah. So yeah. What's a mandala?
No, they,
Yep.
is that like paper?
So this particular one that one. So that thing. Yeah, that thing, that is it's primarily watercolor. It's on paper. So it's graphite and watercolor.
How do you get each side matched with the other? Paint it in half and then push it on the other side?
No, take the workshop. You too can do this. You too can do this. So guess where I start? Start in the middle. So I start with a dot. I either start with a dot or a circle. Because mandalas tend to be found all around the world from the beginning of time. And they're symbols of generally symbols of wholeness, or they show the world. You know, the Buddhist prayer yantras and mandalas. So, and then I go, okay, so you're working intuitively. I don't predictate. It's just, oh, I feel like putting 7 points out. But one of the things that I do with the mandalas that you all are going to learn is that I measure things, and it's very soothing. Okay, I'm going to go out an inch here and an inch here, dot, dot. And then I'm going to go straight up and down, inch, dot, dot. Oh, I want to put them in between two, dot, 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 dot. How do I want to connect those dots? Do I feel this way? Do I feel like it's this kind of arc? So I'm just making, I'm making points, and then I'm connecting the points with lines, whether they're straight or curved. And then I get into that little pencil work and shading. So it's really just doing points on a paper, making a shape to correspond with that point. The way that I generally work is I work 2 ways with these. One, all graphite, all pencil. The whole thing is just slowly evolves out. So you start in the center and you work out, and it can become as big as your paper is, right? And then I go back in and I add watercolor, and then I will often do pencil again. That's the way I do it. But sometimes I'll put some pencil and I'll feel, oh, this feels like I really need this to be yellow, or I really want it to be red and orange and with a little bit of purple at the edge. I mean, so it's endless what you can do. And these are small. They're little. So I make these it's the one thing when I travel, I take my little teeny watercolor pad, this big, so you can take it anywhere. And so I like to work small, although I have made them this big. But I'm making this big in my studio. These are my meditations. These are anywhere I go, because you've gathered this. I need to be in meditation everywhere. I mean, I need to have that. It calms me to do this work. I need to have that calming energy. And so you can do them anywhere. There you go. You're going to be doing them everywhere you go.
Each time I look at it, something looks a little different. Like one time it looks like a bunch of little slippers, and then it's like little bows.
Yeah.
Kind of changes.
And yeah. And so sometimes, like, you should see the one I did, my COVID mandala. But sometimes I'll do them because I'll be inspired by a plant, and I'll want to be have it evoke the leaves, or very particular plant. A lot of them, so they're influenced by place. So wherever I am, this one, I don't know where I was. I think this may be Malibu. I may have been in Malibu. I do them wherever I go. And so that sense of place and what you're seeing, kind of the energy of the place will influence, it influences me. So I'll convey that in these. But yeah. And so I personally like detail, right? But when you make a mandala, you may not want as much detail. You may want to have bigger forms and do them with solid colors and, right? So you can make them with collaging. Anything.
Thank you so much.
Oh, I do want to say one thing.
Yes.
So the Good Heart Artist Residency is doing for the first time an artist trail. So fun. August 17th. All those studios are going to be open. And it's a Saturday. My studio is going to be open. You're more than welcome to come. You can see all the stuff. But here's the whole list. These are all in Harbor. And then you go up. So there are 3 of us on Lake Street or off of Lake Street. And then you go up M119 and it'll be really fun. So there are these for you to take. If you want one of my cards, and they sell some of those note cards. Well, I just have, I had note cards made of my work. So those are available out there. So there you go.